Hi everyone, I'm Nikki Haverstock. I'm a self-published author with 14 Cozy Mysteries available on Amazon, and I'm going to be talking about some harsh advice about harsh advice videos, some tough love about tough love videos, some real talk about real talk videos. Okay, it's a little philosophical, it's a little meta, but I think it's an important conversation to have, and mostly I'm talking about you as the viewer and how you watch these videos. So when I started, I've been thinking, just so you don't think this is a reaction directly, like, oh, so-and-so uploaded a video and then you posted this. I've had this topic in my mind basically since I started AuthorTube. So you know, because you're on YouTube, that you watch one video about a Blue Yeti mic and for the next 2 months, YouTube goes, here's another video, and you're like, yeah, I already got what I wanted. That's what happened to me when I started watching AuthorTube and writing videos. I got served all these videos, and I started getting these videos about tough love, and they usually have 20, 30,000 views, a ton of views, and I go, oh, maybe this is a topic I should, discuss. And I watch the videos, and usually the advice is good, but what I discovered was that I noticed the comments, and a lot of the comments were like, thank you for finally telling it how it is, or anyone who disagrees with this advice, can't be a real writer, and lots of that, and it started to concern me because while the advice was good, none of it was, chiseled on a stone from God above. Most of it was good advice, but my reaction was like, yeah, that's a good point, unless, or yeah, everyone should try that, but it might not work for, or yeah, I can agree with a lot of that, although, and you can see I had all these qualifiers in my mind. So a really common one is, thinking about writing doesn't count as writing. Except it kind of does. I mean, books just don't pop into your head fully formed. And if you're someone who plots, then you do need to think. But that's not bad advice, because people who've been on doing it for 30 years who've said they're writing their book and they never finish it. Those people probably need to write more. But then C.S. Lewis spent like 30 years working on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I'm certainly not going to tell him how to write a book. So that is one example of one kind of advice that I heard a lot in these videos. Another kind of advice that I heard a lot was, if you are writing this many words in this amount of time, you're not any good. One of the examples I heard was, if you can publish a 100K book in 6 months, it's not very good. How do you know that? I mean, I've heard a lot of people talk about that they think about a book for years, and then when they actually sit down and write it, it might all come out in a month or two. Those are called binge writers. That is a big part. If you look at my word count, I might have like 2K one month, 2K one month, 40K one month, 5K the next month. It is because I need a lot of thinking time. I have a whole video on writing more for slow writers, or thinking writers, because we need a lot of thinking time. So I've heard people say talking about your book and thinking about your book isn't writing. Except sometimes it is. Not always, but sometimes it is. So my concern with a lot of these videos, and I think a lot of people know this when they do these videos, because if you watch really carefully, I've even seen one rebut their own video. Here's my hard writing advice. Here's a video where I give you the other side of the coin. I think it's a great way to do it. I think what's important though is you as the viewer, as the author, as the writer, keep this in mind when you watch these kind of videos, including mine. When I give advice, you should keep this in mind. One, a lot of this is good advice to consider, but you shouldn't apply it to every single thing. So if somebody says, try to write every day, you might be a binge writer. You might need a couple days off, and then you might have the theory of writing every day, but it might be like every month, or it might be that you rest up for a little bit. One of the big problems I have with these videos is that they promise certainty. Here's the key. Publishing's an uncertain business. I don't like it either. Trust me, if I could get, and I'm constantly trying to do this, if I could just get a set of rules that every real writer follows, then I would know I was a real writer. And I haven't been able to do it, because everybody, if you talk to 100 successful writers, they're going to have different things. And if you want proof of that, first of all, there's YouTube. There's plenty of people. Even if you just look at people that have published books, or just traditional, or just self-publishing, or just people who make a living on their writing, then you're going to see a large variety. I've mentioned before that I watch Masterclass, and every single author in there talks differently. Aaron Sorkin, who wrote The West Wing, talks about being in writer's block for months at a time, and he's miserable. And I thought, finally, my kindred spirit is Aaron Sorkin, because I am constantly struggling with that. I cannot write as fast as I want. They could offer a form of gatekeeping, or another way to say that is they only describe a certain kind of success. So there's a certain kind of author who sits down every day and writes carefully and always goes linearly and maybe uses a plot or whatever. And it can be a form of gatekeeping. If you can't do X, Y, and Z, then you're not a real writer. It's great for the people that meet that criteria, because they can go, woohoo, I've made it. I'm going to make it. Of course, what a lot of people discover is that no matter how hard they attempt to follow these rules, they still can't, doesn't work for them. And it can be this really big high and this really big low. It can describe a certain kind of success. And what I mean is, if somebody says the only real writers are traditionally published writers, well, there are successful traditional published writers, but there's a lot that are indie. On the other hand, you could say, I know a lot of writers. I would say a majority of all of them are indie writers, but I do have several friends who make a good living as traditional published authors. It works for their lifestyle. They understand the risks, and they have done both, and they've discovered that just for them, it just works a lot better. I shouldn't say I only know two. I know two really well that have been really honest about it. That I know are making money, because I know them well enough to do that. I certainly know other traditionally published authors that are happy. It can be a form of external validation. So rather than having to wrestle with just accepting that you are a writer because you said you're a writer, this can be a form of external validation. Well, so-and-so gave me 5 real tough choices on how to be a writer, and I'm doing all those things, therefore I'm a real writer. And it's a way around imposter syndrome. And I can admit that one of the things that set me off is someone had said, if you can't self-publish to this level, you're not a real writer. And it really hurt me, because I can't. I have some learning disabilities. I don't have a great objective. So I can read over the book, and I can tell you that the words that were picked were what I needed to pick, but I cannot self-edit beyond that. I send it to my dev editor comes back with questions, and then I can see it in a new light. Maybe I'm a better writer than I think I am. Maybe that person would say, oh no, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about whatever. That's just an example. I'm not going to call out the person, because that is clearly something I'm carrying a lot of baggage on, and that is my issue, not theirs. But this can be, you can look to these outside people, and you'll see it. If you read in the comments, people will say things like, thank you for finally telling us the truth. I do all those things, and people who don't are failures or are wannabes. And I totally understand that, and I've probably said the same thing. Unfortunately, when I started out, I knew it all. Okay, I read the books, I listened to the people, I knew it all, and the farther along I go, the more uncertain I get about everything, beyond the fact that people have to like your work. What that means even, I've seen people who seem to even confuse like good writing style with a good story, and it's like, sometimes your stories can be written well and just aren't interesting. And the last thing, the last specific point I want to make is that these rules, these tough rules, can at times set yourself up for failure. So just a really quick example that I don't think anyone really believes anymore is a real writer writes every day. And you go, yeah, a real writer writes every day. I finish one book and I immediately start the next one. And I never, and then something happens and you have a block, you have burnout. If your mom died and you had cared for her and you couldn't write, do you really think that would make you not a real writer? I hope not. I hope that's not something you probably wouldn't say to someone else, but you might believe it yourself, unfortunately. We're a lot tougher on ourselves. But when you set up all these criteria that real writers do this, and this is tough love, and this is harsh advice, it ends up being that you can set yourself up for self-imposed failure. So then you set all these rules up, and then when you can't meet them, suddenly all of your confidence is gone. So what I would suggest instead is that you take every bit of advice as a cure for an illness you might not have. So, like I said, the thinking about writing isn't writing. That is absolutely true if you are never ever writing. But if thinking gets you to write more, then it's good. And there'll be people on every end of the spectrum, and every bit of advice I could give you a counter example of why it might not be good advice and all that. So what do you think? Am I totally out of line here, or can you see the point that I'm trying to make? Bye.